Mad Dog Morgan is a 1976 independent Australian film written and directed by Philippe Mora, whose illustrious career includes such gems as Communion and Howling 3: The Marsupials. It stars Dennis Hopper, David Gulpilil, Jack Thompson, Bill Hunter, Frank Thring, and a host of Australian acting talent from the decade. The film is based on the book Morgan by Margaret Carnegie, which is an account of the life of Mad Dan Morgan, a bushranger that operated in New South Wales and Victoria in the 1860s. Morgan was renowned for his unpredictable and violent nature. Wherever he went, death and destruction was left in his wake. This film attempts to humanise Morgan and create an explanation for his wild behaviours. There is repeated symbolism related to death, hunting, science, and animals that tie in with the overall theme of nature versus nurture. The ongoing debate throughout the film is whether Morgan is human or some form of gorilla, and we are also led to question whether Morgan's actions were the result of an innate wildness or a corrupt, violent, and oppressive society.
It's your money or your life, and it's in that order.
We begin the film with a young Morgan living on the goldfields, getting into fights and frequenting the opium dens. Dennis Hopper is in fine form as the jumpy, ill-tempered Irishman, though Morgan was born in Australia, at a time where the Australian accent was already common. It is here we see the brutality of the men with whom he shares the fields, when a group of angry racists burst into the den where Morgan is laying stoned and slumped against a wall, and begin shooting any Chinese people they can find, before moving on to whoever is left. Morgan is soon pushed into a life of crime due to poverty and ends up in prison, which proves to be a far worse fate. He sees an escapee shot dead, is branded by guards, and sexually assaulted by a group of inmates before he's even finished his first day. After his release, he eventually teams up with Billy, played by the effervescent Gulpilil, who was presumably a stand-in for German Bill, who was Morgan's accomplice in real life. Billy is vital to Morgan's transition to bushranging, as he not only nurses him to health from a bullet wound, but teaches him how to survive in the bush, and provides Morgan with the emotional support he has been deprived of all of his life to that point. We are frequently treated to glimpses of Frank Thring chomping the scenery as the lugubrious Superintendent Cobham to explain what high society was saying about Morgan, in an attempt to set up the themes and the ending, which is none too pleasant.
By all means, off with his head. And don't forget the scrotum.
The film progresses through Morgan's insane whirlwind career and deepening mental instability until the fateful hold-up of the Peachelwa station. Throughout, Morgan is a sympathetic character, albeit one whose decisions are not ones we can easily get on board with, but the ambiguity that emerges from seeing someone doing such horrendous acts while being victimized to a degree by the society of the time is absolutely perfect. In the end, we're left to make our own conclusion about who Morgan was. While some of the writing plays up some of Morgan's eccentricities and takes liberty with certain characters, the underlying truth of Morgan's life and times is there throughout. To some degree, the truthfulness of this account is heightened by the artifice. While the director and some of the cast and crew may have misunderstood key aspects of the history,
and he did hang out with the Aborigines. Different than Ned Kelly, he worked alone, except for this telegraph service, which were Aborigines.
there were many more aspects they really understood well. One gets a feel for the earthiness of the lifestyle of the pioneers, the sense of isolation and need for practicality. The sets are amazing, costumes superb, and the music first rate. Mad Dog Morgan is often considered one of the greatest Australian films of all time, and not without reason. It is a film that tries very hard to address big themes, and has some of the most glorious cinematography ever put to film, as well as the insane stunt work that Australian films are renowned for. Unfortunately, some elements have not dated well, specifically much of the acting, which is quite hammy at times, the editing that is choppy and often has an uneven tempo, and some of the more over-the-top effects that suffer due to budget and technology constraints. However, it is far more brilliant than it is hokey, and it makes it one of my favourite movies, and a must-see for enthusiasts of cinema, history, and bushrangers in particular.
I missed so much of my life, sir. Mr. McPherson, I've missed so much of my life, sir. I've missed so much of my life, sir. And I'm not trying to be sentimental either. I'm not trying to be. Do you know how lucky I am to be Dan Morgan, sir? Do you know how lucky I am to be Dan Morgan, sir? I could have. Well, you only go around once, you know, as they say. I'll tell you what, that Irish whiskey's pretty good.
Over the border to rifle and plunder, over the border went Morgan the bold. Over the border a terrible blunder, for over the border Bob Morgan lies cold.